right, greetings and grace to everyone out there. It's your girl once again, Tish, back with another clear perspective and another episode of Ask a Black Conservative. And I hope you guys are doing well today. I am doing pretty good, and I am excited to bring before you an awesome guest who can give us some great insight on our topic of the day, which is going to be Ask a Black Conservative about police brutality. And guess who we're going to ask? We're going to ask an actual police officer, okay? So, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my guest for this episode, Mr. Eric Muldrow.
Hello.
Awesome sauce. Welcome to Ask a Black Conservative.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, go right ahead.
No, I just want to say thanks. Thanks for allowing me to have this opportunity. I'm looking forward to it.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to you getting into some of these questions that I have for a Black conservative who happened to be a police officer. All right, so Mr. Muldrow, to give you some background on him, he is a 20-year veteran police officer. He had a career in law enforcement, and now he is the founder and creator of a site, maybe a project. He can give a little bit more insight on it. It's called Code Red Conversations, where his purpose is to basically inform the public about police tactics, give safety tips, and encouragement. So, Mr. Muldrow, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and about what you got going on now that you're outside of law enforcement?
Yeah, well, you pretty much hit it on the head. Since I retired in 2014, I've had a few opportunities that arose over the years where I was able to speak on these issues. And it was mainly just by following certain people. Like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the radio show or internet show, Airing the Addisons.
No.
There's a show called Airing the Addisons with Will and Mickey Addison. I highly recommend that for anyone out there. But I had listened to their show, conservative, Christian perspective, with an emphasis on the Black community. That's their show. And I had been listening to them for a while. And then when the shooting took place in Dallas, where the multiple police officers were killed, while there was a BLM protest or rally going on, they reached out to me to discuss things from my perspective. And then from there, it's pretty much been I've had a tremendous amount of opportunities to where I've been able to discuss these issues and give people a more broader understanding, to the best of my ability, a broader understanding of police when it comes to their tactics. So, I was just brainstorming, and I was like, you know what, I really want to develop something to where I can have this on a more consistent basis. So a big portion of 2018 was trying to understand video editing and YouTube and all this stuff, so I can build a platform so I can reach the masses. Because truly, my heart and desire is, when it comes to the Black community, is to, for lack of a better term, to free the Black community. Because we have been duped, for a lack of a better term, by much of the media to have a overwhelming fear. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't some truth to the issues that have plagued the Black community and law enforcement. I would be foolish to say that there is no issue. There haven't been any problems historically. But the way the problem or the issue the way the issues have been framed as of late, you would think we were back in the Jim Crow South in 1900. That's the way it's being put out there in the public. And I really want people to understand that things aren't always as they seem. And I want to use Code Red Conversations as a platform to reach people. So whether it be through my Facebook page or whether it be through my Code Red Conversations channel on YouTube, I'm trying to build a bigger platform as possible so people can truly understand and walk away with more knowledge, so they can have a better understanding of law enforcement and their tactics.
How about this? So would you say that Code Red Conversations is a media company first, or is it a consulting
I would say
type?
media, because there's a message that I'm seeking to get across. My big picture, I would love to see it expand to the point to where I'm doing consulting and working. I've done a few speaking engagements, and I would just love to see that grow and grow, so the word can get out. More people can know the truth.
And so where were your law enforcement? Where did you practice law? Where were you a police officer?
Yeah, the first portion of my career, I worked as a corrections officer. I lived in Indiana, Michigan City, which is about 60 miles outside of Chicago or 40 miles outside of Gary, Indiana. Unfortunately, two high crime areas in our nation. And I worked at a maximum security prison for around 3 years. And that was from the end of 1992, after I got out of the Army, till 1995. And then in 95, I moved out to Las Vegas and started working for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department from 1996 all the way till 2014. Well, during that period of time, I worked in the capacity of a corrections officer for the county. And I also worked as a patrol officer. I worked in gangs. I worked in counterintelligence. I was a counterintelligence officer or counterterrorism officer. I worked in intelligence. And I was a defensive tactics instructor, I was a firearms instructor, and I was an active shooter instructor. So I wore a lot of hats while I was there. I wasn't just a guy pushing the black and white. Not that I'm putting those guys down at all, because that's the biggest aspect of our job and probably the hardest. But I wanted to gain as much knowledge as I could so I could be as effective as I could.
Okay, so let's just start then with the current police brutality narratives. As you just said, the way that things are narrated is as if we are living between the 1900s or 1700s and the 1960s relative to, right? And so now tell me, what do you know about the history in terms of police precincts and departments and so forth? I had a guest on the other day who mentioned that he understood that police precincts or policing started in the slave era, just to kind of keep control of the Black community. Are you familiar with that history yourself in terms of the history of police precincts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with it. I haven't studied it in much detail, and I think that there's no way you can get away from the ugly history that is associated with aspects of law enforcement. But the question I would ask those who say that is, just because I think that's a prime example of something that's known as the genetic fallacy. It's based on the origin of something, doesn't necessarily correlate to like how it's actually being utilized today. It's like an example of the genetic fallacy is I learned 9 + 9 is 18, but I learned it from Adolf Hitler. So the fact that the source of the information was a negative source, it doesn't necessarily correlate that you can't trust it. Right. So the history of law enforcement is tainted and can be very ugly, but the current capacity in which law enforcement functions in today is a long way away from where it used to be.
Okay, exactly. And I would say that the person that gave me that information would agree with you with regards to that.
Cool.
But in terms of understanding the history, it's always just kind of good to know.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so give us some insight on why police do what they do in light of the narrative that is constantly pushed as though we're living within this antiquated period. Why do police officers respond the way that they respond, right? Because a lot of the incidences occur or that are reported with people that are unarmed. So can you unpack how you guys are trained relative to responding to individuals?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a detailed question. That what came across as a simple question, there's so much to it. Like we can do the whole show just on that one question, because every situation is different. There is no black and white when it comes to, no pun intended, there's no black and white when it comes to law enforcement. We operate in a series of gray areas continually. Like, look, we'll take any incident you can think of. We'll take the let me think. Michael Brown. We'll take the Michael Brown shooting. Now, there was a lot of questions as to why he shot him. And oftentimes, that may not be the greatest example because we were able to get clarity out of that as time went on. We were able to determine what happened and because of witnesses. But initially, a lot of the information that was put forth was clouded and people just assumed things to be true until more details started coming out. So you found out that he had just committed a robbery, and then witnesses stated that he attacked the officer. So when I say that there's so many gray areas, it all depends. When I was going through my police training, when we would ask questions, I was in the police academy, we would ask questions of the academy staff, and their response was so often, well, it depends. It depends on so many variables. What the suspect's actions were. What did the suspect do? What time of day is it? Meaning, how much light does the officer have to be able to see all the details? How much experience does the officer have? What are the physical abilities of the officer? Is it a 5'2" female, or is it a 6'3", 250-pound officer who's an MMA fighter on the side and he's a firearms instructor? Or, we can go on and on when it comes to the variables. Is the suspect being combative, or is the suspect being passive and agreeing? There's so many details that are involved in the decision-making process for a law enforcement officer that it's never a simple cut and dry, well, this happened, he should have done this. It's never that cut and dry. And the reality is that the Supreme Court and most of the lower courts recognize the fact that police officers in their decision-making are forced to make decisions in situations that are often rapidly evolving, and they're forced to make split-second decisions. So that plays a role. So a lot of times when people say, well, the cop got off, why do they always seem like they got off? People have this perception that police officers are expected to be perfect, but the standard is reasonable. Were their actions considered reasonable? And that's the Supreme Court precedence. So, and it's based on a reasonable officer's perspective, not the average citizen who doesn't have the training. It's what would a reasonable officer do? So those things affect the outcome as far as the actions. There's so many factors. Like I said, we can go on and on about that.
So when you say a reasonable officer, what is the criteria or standard to judge whether or not an officer is reasonable, right? So is that a variable, also a variable situation?
I would say so too, based on the situation, based on the information, based on the facts and circumstances known to the officer at that time. And then that's where the standard, that's where that comes from. It's what he would know. We can watch a video. You and I can sit back and watch a video of a recent shooting, and we can rewind it multiple times, and we can point out all the problems. Actually, in one of my more recent videos, I addressed a shooting that took place in 2016 where 2 police officers were killed by one individual. And I took the time and I detailed a lot of the mistakes that they made. Now, I had the opportunity to do that because I wanted to break it down and point out all the flaws in judgment that were made on the officers, not to beat them down or be ultra critical, but just to dissect it so that if there's another officer who happens to click on my video, he could say, man, they made a lot of mistakes. When I'm on a call, I'm gonna make sure I do this or I don't do that. So when we're talking about, I'm sorry, I totally lost track of the question that you had just asked me.
I was asking you what the standard was for a reasonable officer, because you said that the lower courts and the Supreme Courts and so forth are saying, they are making their decisions based on what they believe a reasonable officer would do, right? And so
Right, right.
in many of the narratives, right, when we're talking about what, that leads me to ask, what is a reasonable officer? How do I identify a reasonable officer? Because with the narratives out there, they can
Hmm.
say, oh, he's racist, so that wouldn't be a reasonable, you know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's operating with these racist presuppositions. So
Hmm.
now he can't be a reasonable officer. He can't be. You follow me?
Right, right. And that's so I would say to sum it up would be it's based on the facts and circumstances known to the officer at that time without the benefit of hindsight, meaning us being able to go. That's when I started discussing sitting back and being able to evaluate these situations. I was able to watch the video and point out the problems with their decision making. The officer on the scene, he doesn't have that opportunity. He doesn't have that ability to be able to say, okay, let me slow this situation down and see it from slow motion. These things are happening. They're happening now. You got, he has the all the situations in the environment going on. It could be loud noise. It could be dark. Yeah, it could be, he could be hearing someone screaming for help, and all these factors can play a role. So reasonable officer is, like I said, to sum it up, is what he knew at that time based on his training and experience without the benefit of hindsight being 2020. Of course, you can look back and say, well, he should have done that. Of course, we can do that all day long. But when you started referencing the race issue, when people love to assume racism, I love to say, well, how do we know? How do we know that at that time? Just because a white officer shoots a black man, we know 100% for a fact that what was going on in his brain, that it was purely motivated by his hatred towards that individual's ethnic group. I mean, unless you can read minds, or unless he has a track record of proven history of being a bigot, there's no way you can know that. Or unless he articulates something like that during the incident, there's no way you can know that for a fact. But we can, I think oftentimes we as in the Black community, the history is so ugly in this nation as far as racism and bigotry and oppression, that assuming something was racially motivated is like our go-to. We just automatically, just assume that, man, it has to have been race. It couldn't be anything else. But yet, if the situation was reversed and we were in that situation, I think we would want the benefit of having the opportunity to prove our case and to say, you know what, no, that's not the case. We have a massive crime issue in the Black community. Let's be real. There's when we look at the numbers, there's a huge crime issue in the Black community, especially when you look at it from the perspective of we only make up 13% of the population. So if we look at over 50% of the violent crime takes place are committed by those by a certain percentage of a few offenders, or I wouldn't say a few, but a smaller percentage in the Black community. Would it be fair if someone just said, oh, he's Black, she's Black, obviously they're out there committing crime? No, that wouldn't be fair. So why are we not willing to afford someone else that same opportunity? The same opportunity to be able to defend themselves.
Right. Okay, so how familiar are you with some of the marquee cases, police brutality cases that have been, trotted out to us in the media and made, a huge deal of?
I'm pretty familiar with quite a few of them. I'm pretty familiar. I took some time to, especially the ones where we're able to have a video and the police related issues, and we're able to watch and see what happens. A lot of those I dissected pretty well. I took some time to really break them down.
Okay. All right. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to throw out some, and then you can tell me from your brief analysis. We know you can't go super in depth, and I would refer anyone who's interested to your site, Code Red Conversations, and maybe to your Facebook page so that they can engage with you one-on-one. But I'm going to throw out a few of these cases, and you can tell me what your impression was, if there was some real malfeasance on the part of the police officer, or was this something that was likely politically motivated?
Okay.
Or you know what I mean, or had no real bearing. All right, so let's start with what you know about Trayvon Martin.
Well, that situation was the biggest issue I had with that was that all the information that we had, apart from the cell phone conversations that were taking place, were witnesses. And without going into detail, obviously, because there were no cops involved in that situation, without going into tremendous detail, you had to go based on physical evidence and witness statements, primarily. That's all the real information that they had. So one thing that I am big on, I love quoting a Bible verse. I believe it's found in Proverbs chapter 18, I believe.
Yes, I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, where it talks about the one who states, there's a couple of verses. The one who states his case first seems right until his brother comes and challenges him. We are so prone to assume one way or another. My mindset is, can we wait? Can we slow down? Can we wait till we get more information, more data before we come to a final verdict and try someone in the court of public opinion? And the Michael Brown case is a prime example of that. I don't want to steal any of your thunder by going to the Michael Brown case.
Okay, before you go there though, just tell me now. The Trayvon Martin incident had just occurred, and now you're the police officer that gets the call to show up after the fact. What are you asking? What are you looking for?
You block off the area. You check for any physical evidence. You speak to anyone, possibly any neighbors. You see if there are any cameras. You look for witnesses. You look for information. Okay. That's the first thing that you do.
Okay. But what I'm asking is let's just assume with what you know now, right, of the case, and you showed up, right, and you see what you saw. Excuse me. You see what's been reported. Trayvon's maybe on the ground. Where's George Zimmerman? Like what do? Do you talk to George Zimmerman? Follow what I'm saying? Instead of giving me the generic protocol, give me the protocol of what you would do, knowing what you know about the case, and you were the officer that showed up. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, part of what I'm saying plays a role. Part of what I was saying plays a role in that, because you're in the information gathering mode. You want to know what happened. So you're definitely going to interview George Zimmerman. You're definitely going to look for any physical evidence of a conflict, look at his hands, look at his back of his head, look at his face, see who, you'll ask and see if you can see his phone and see who he was speaking to, talk to the dispatcher, because he was having a conversation with the dispatcher prior to the incident taking place. You just, ultimately what you're going to want to do is gather all the information you can, find out who he is, find out what his criminal history is, if there was any whatsoever, find out who the deceased is. You want to know who he is, see if he has any identification on him. There's like I said, it's even in a situation like that, knowing what you know, knowing what I know now, the protocol as far as how you deal with the incident upon arrival is basically the same. Yeah, you might ask a few different questions, but you're still going to be in that mode to where you're trying to gather information to be able to make a case one way or the other.
Okay. So then would you say, based on the verdict of the case, as a police officer, having observed it from the critical analysis that you would as a police officer, would you say that was an accurate verdict to let him off or not?
Honestly, when it comes down, I would say that because I've never really came to a conclusion of saying, well, this and that, because I didn't follow the case all the way through. Okay. I wasn't in the jury room listening to all the DNA evidence, all the evidence when it comes to the firearms, the witness statements. In that situation, I don't assume to make a decision because I don't have all the facts. Now, there's some people that are like, oh, he shouldn't have got off. I know this and that. You don't know. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't have all the information that they got in that courtroom. Unless you were sitting there and you're getting all this and you're hearing the defense, you're hearing the prosecution side. Unless you're getting all that information, you don't know. I mean, it's available. If you go to YouTube, almost every moment of that trial is available. But when it comes down to that situation, I really don't try to break it down and try to say definitively yes or no, because I don't have all the facts.
Okay. All right, so let's go to the next case. Michael Brown then. Based on what you know there, would you say that was accurate to allow that officer to go free and not be prosecuted?
I think the things that were, I think that the information that came out as time went on, the fact that Michael Brown had demonstrated the ability to commit a violent crime. Robbery is a violent crime, where you actually take something against the person of another with force or violence, fear of injury, immediate or future. So the video that came out plays a role because it can demonstrate, because the media narrative was like this 17-year-old gentle giant got gunned down mercilessly with his hands up saying, "Don't shoot," by a police officer. But then as time went on, we came to find out that was completely false, that was completely made up. And witnesses, the ones you have to rely on, there were actual physical witness. The problem with the Trayvon Martin case was, if I'm not mistaken, there weren't any witnesses in the area. You just could, all you could go by was the testimony of the girlfriend of Trayvon and George Zimmerman, and DNA evidence, physical evidence on scene. But when it comes down to the Michael Brown case, as time went on, you had people initially going before the media saying that he had his hands up and he said, "Don't shoot," and Eric Garner just gunned him down. And then, or Darren Wilson, I'm sorry, just gunned him down. And then, but as time went on, you started seeing the truth. The facts started coming out that never took place, and that he attacked the officer repeatedly, and he was a big guy, and the officer's physical, like, when you really get down, there's a belief, and I don't mean to jump around a little bit. I don't mean to jump around too much, but
okay.
there's a belief that he's a 17-year-old kid. What could he do against a grown man? Let me tell you something. I've been doing law enforcement for a long time. I know some teenagers. I know what I was capable of at 17 years old. 17 years old, I was practicing martial arts, and there were guys in my dojo that I could whoop. I mean, it wasn't even, and there were grown men, 30s, 40s, 50s. There were no competition for me. I knew what I was capable of. I lifted weights, I ran, I was preparing myself for the military, I trained in martial arts. So I had skills, I could take care of myself. And I knew I was physically stronger than a lot of grown men. And 17 years old, you're not a child, you're not a baby. You're grown, you're close to being a legitimate legal adult at 18 years old. So this whole concept of that he couldn't have posed any harm, him or Trayvon, is just not realistic. It's just not realistic.
Well, to that narrative again, in terms of it being politically motivated with Trayvon Martin, they kept showing the picture of him when he was like a 10-year-old, as opposed to
right.
the actual age he was in the
right.
So
and,
that's very interesting.
And in no way, like me chuckling about it, just in the conversation, is not to make light of the situation. Lives were lost, and they were lost tragically. But at the same time, we need to search and seek. There are so many deeper issues that are going on within our community. And it's easy to blame someone else. It's easy to point the finger at someone else, as opposed to saying, man, we have issues. There are problems going on in our community. When blacks commit, especially black males, commit over 52% of the violent crimes. Although if you want to dissect it down to just the black males, we make up less than 6% of the population. And you're talking about over 50% of the violent crimes within a nation. There's a problem there. And instead of focusing on, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have concerns when it comes to police brutality. Absolutely. I know how my job is made harder. My job as a law enforcement officer is made harder by those idiot cops out there who think they can get away with doing whatever they want to do. And most of the cops I know, they feel exactly the same way. They feel like if an officer gets charged with police brutality or homicide, like, you know, murder, they should be put under the prison, under the jail, because that puts a stain on the career field that so many of us are really passionate about, so many of us love, who are actually out there policing these bad neighborhoods. We're actually trying to make a difference in these areas because we actually have a genuine love for people and we love what we do. So there, like I said, the problem is never as simple as police brutality. It's just the cops are bad. No, it's all the way around. Everyone needs to be able to look within and say, hey, is there something that I can learn while I'm doing my job to make it better? Or is there some way I can interact with a police officer to where I'm not challenging him? If I'm stopped by a cop, why do I have to run? If I'm stopped by a cop, why do I have to resist? Something, and I took some time from 2017. I was doing this a few months ago. I started studying the cases where police officers black men were shot unarmed. And I was working my way through each one of those. I didn't get all the way through, but I got more than halfway through. And the vast majority of them, you see someone committing a crime or someone resisting arrest, someone fleeing. Now, I'm not saying that they deserve to die because of that. But if you're fighting the police, if you're physically fighting, physically resisting the police with all the variables and all the problems going on, you're increasing the chances that some harm can come to you. Why would anyone in their right frame of mind do something as foolish as fight or run, especially if you're under the impression that cops are out there trying to hunt down black men, especially if you believe that.
Right.
Just go with hey, I got caught. I'm dealing with it. Let me deal with it, and let me take it to, if I feel like I'm innocent, let me address it through internal affairs or something along those lines. But we have to have a change of culture on both sides.
Right. That's a great point. Okay. With that, what about the Eric Gardner case that you talk about resisting arrest and so forth? What is your take on the police officer's actions of
during that case,
subduing him, and he talking about he can't breathe and all of that?
Yeah. I had a lot of problems with that one, especially as someone with a history of martial arts and a defensive tactics instructor as a police officer. Now, I'm not pleased with Eric Garner and his resisting in the first place. He should have just cooperated, because I don't know what the exact numbers are, but as I stated earlier, that if you're resisting, the odds of something horrific happening increase dramatically, tremendously. So he played a role in that. However, when the officer used a tactic, I just can't help but think that that there could have been a better way of handling that situation. Mm-hmm. They could have called the supervisor, had the supervisor come out and talk to him and just say, hey, this is where we're at. Or because the fact that he used a technique that was illegal by New York, if I'm not mistaken, like he had a chokehold as opposed to like more of a vascular neck restraint. I think that I can't help but think that that officer walked away. He shouldn't have walked away scot-free, like with nothing. That's one of the cases that I've seen in recent history that always bothered me. It just never seemed like the force that he used with the numbers of officers that were available. It seemed like my impression, based on my limited knowledge, like I said, I didn't sit there and listen to the whole case, but based on my limited knowledge, the force that he used, it seemed like he used too much, and there could have been another way for him to handle that.
It was overkill.
It seemed to be like excessive. It seemed to me that it was excessive, but that's just my personal opinion. And like I said, there are other people that have a different perspective on that, but.
So based on what you know, you would have acted differently.
I don't want to compare, because, not every situation is easy. Well, you could just make a similar comparison. This officer did this, so that officer should It's not as
No,
simple as that.
no,
But I've been, say again?
no, no, no. I'm definitely not seeking to have you make that comparison
No,
in that sense. But because to me, you seem, very grounded and sober, and you know what I mean. So, what would you do? Just forget anybody.
Right.
Just pretend it was you. What?
Yeah. I've been in similar situations like that. And there's a time and place where you got to jump up and grab somebody around the neck and take them to the ground. I've been there before. You just got to do what you got to do. But with the numbers of officers that were there, it seemed to me, I wasn't there, that they could have subdued him differently, or they could have worked this situation out to where a man didn't end up having to die. If someone's saying, I can't breathe, you need to adjust your position. Little things like that. You need to adjust your position to where he can, I'm still controlling you, but you need to be able to get air. And a lot of these different factors play, like I said, there's so many factors that play a role in it. And it was terrible. It was tragic to me.
Yeah. All right. What about Freddie Gray, the situation when he's traveling in the back? From what you know about, transporting people, how in the world did that happen, you think?
You know what? Honestly, I was like in transition, moving from Arkansas to Las Vegas, or I think from Vegas to Arkansas. I was in Arkansas for a few years while that case was going on, and I kind of like lost track of that one. I didn't really follow that one too much, but I do know, because I worked in the capacity of a transport officer where you transported people back and forth. You got to secure people. I mean, it just seemed like there was so much going on with that case. It was like a witch hunt based on all the other events that had taken place where cops were being questioned. It was, and obviously because the DA, she brought that before tried to make a case out of that without fully taking time to gather as much information. She seemed like she just wanted to make an example of these officers, but pretty much every one of them got thrown out. I don't think she took the time to truly develop a case to try to make her point. But like I said, but again, I don't want to speak in tremendous detail on that one, because that's one of the cases that I didn't follow. But like if we get into some of the other ones, I think, especially like with Alton Sterling and, some of these other, Stephen Clark, some of these other cases, I was definitely following a little more detail.
Go ahead and speak on that, Sterling. Then I want to hear what you have to say about Philando Castile, Juan McDonald, Tamir Rice, and Sandra Bland. Give me some insights on each of those.
Right. Now let me just hit on the Alton Sterling. I can almost summarize, because I'll end up repeating myself a lot with a lot of these situations, unfortunately. And I mentioned it already, but I made a video of it on my YouTube channel for Code Red Conversations, where I spoke on, and I titled the video, I made the title a little maybe explosive, for lack of a better word, just to really get people's attention, like how to survive a police encounter. And it is a short video. I don't really go into a whole lot of detail. I just tell people, don't resist. Don't run. Don't fight. If you get stopped by the police, whether you're in the wrong or whether you're in the right, don't resist. And a lot of people question the use of internal affairs if you have an issue with the police. Let me tell you something, and I can speak from Las Vegas Metro Police. No officer wants to go to internal affairs. It is a headache, it is stressful, and they do their job. I've seen many an officer, and I want to repeat that. I've seen many an officer arrested and many an officer locked up. Now, it may not make national news, but it happens. It happens a lot more than most people would be prone to want to believe if all you do is sit back and watch CNN and MSNBC and all these liberal news sources. I mean, because let's face it, the reality is those are the ones who are framing it as the cops are the enemy, predominantly.
Right.
But I try to encourage people, whether you're innocent or guilty, when you're confronted by the police, comply. Compliance saves lives. Alton Sterling, yeah, I just want to make sure I'm not getting them confused with Philando Castile. Alton Sterling resisted. He resisted the police. And time again, Stephen Clark resisted by running, by fleeing. You are just putting yourself in a horrendous, horrific situation, especially if you're already out there committing a crime. And that's one thing that it seems to me gets buried in all of this, is the culpability of the suspect, the culpability of the deceased. Unfortunately, the fact that they were out there in many of these cases, not all of them, but in many of these cases committing a crime. Why do we just act like that plays no fact? Why do we act as if that plays no factor at all? I just don't understand that. You're out there committing a life of crime. Bible says we reap what we sow. If you are out there committing crime and you're out there slinging dope, destroying lives, out there robbing and stealing, breaking into people's homes, breaking into vehicles, should we be really surprised? Now, we're not wishing death on anybody, but should we be truly surprised when someone who lives a life like that ultimately meets a tragic end? We shouldn't be surprised. So why aren't we taking time to hold the individual accountable and say, man, but look what he was doing. He put himself in a situation like that. Had he had his behind home in bed, he would have been able to live to see another day. So we can't just totally ignore those things. But when we talk about who are we talking about? Alton Sterling. He was resisting the police, and the officers were giving verbal commands. Officers, we're encouraged to give commands, verbal commands. Stop resisting, turn around, put your hands behind your back, get on the ground, hands up, whatever the case may be. We're encouraged to do that. Once you make a decision that you are not going to comply, you open the door. You're opening the door to an officer getting physical with you. And then then whatever happens from there, if the officer feels as if you're reaching for something and you have a gun on you, or the case may be, or the officer identifies you having your cell phone that you're reaching for, or a gun because you're trying to toss it, he may not even have been trying to kill the officer. He might have just been trying to hide it because an ex-felon in possession of a firearm is additional time in crime. When you open up that door for that by resisting the police, I don't know, what else can I say? What else can I say? But oftentimes in most of these situations, no one cares about that. It's what that officer did. That's all that matters.
So what about Philando Castile, that case?
Yeah, that was, I had written up a long article on my personal Facebook page discussing that. It's like, what do you do with that? Honestly, I mean, there's so many aspects of it. And some people listening to this are going to say, oh, he's just taking the officer's side. No, what I'm trying to do is give you a perspective that the average citizen doesn't have. I can speak as a citizen all day. I was a citizen long before I stepped into law enforcement, but most of the people listening don't have a law enforcement background and won't be able to properly even consider these things. I was having a discussion with my brother. He's very liberal, and we have our debates all the time.
Your actual blood brother?
Blood brother, yeah.
Oh, okay.
My actual blood brother. And we have debates all the time. And we were talking about the Philando Castile case, and I said, man, I'm not going to sit up here and say, yeah, that was a good shooting and all this kind of stuff, because it was horrible. I mean, it was a tragic situation. But I said, but the only question I have in this whole situation is, based on the information that the officer knew, or at least the information that he was gathering, he believed that he was possibly dealing with a suspect who had committed an armed robbery. Even though he had given, and I want to make a point here about how situations can change really quick. Even though he had given the officer information, said that he was a licensed carrier. And then he was like, don't reach for it. Don't reach for it. My only question is this. What did that officer see when he was looking into the vehicle? Was he under the impression that he looked like he was reaching for something that appeared to be a gun? And based on what I've heard, that's what he thought. Mm-hmm. And then I've had people say, well, the other officer was there and he was looking inside the vehicle. He didn't see anything. And here's a point to where I want to address the difference, the roles of an officer on a car stop or on a person stop. There's the contact officer, which I think his name is Geronimo. I can't remember the officer's name. That was the officer who shot Philando Castillo. You have the contact officer who deals with the quote unquote suspect. And then you have the cover officer, the officer on the other side. The cover officer's job is to primarily see what else is going on in the car. Because the primary officer the contact officer is dealing with the quote unquote suspect. The other officer's job is to deal with if there's anyone else or the environment. He's supposed to offer backup, so to speak. So a lot of people argue, well, the other officer didn't see anything, so why didn't he fire? And I'm like, well, you're looking in the vehicle. It could be a little dark in the vehicle. You have one officer focused on the girlfriend, the other officer focusing on the quote unquote suspect. So what he saw as the contact officer, the primary officer, that's the only thing we can ultimately go by, what he believed he saw. Now, is it possible that he overreacted? Absolutely, it's possible. But at the same time, I'm not going to condemn him flat out because I wasn't there. I didn't see what he saw or what he thought that he saw. And going back to Graham versus Connor, let me explain a little bit about what Graham versus Connor is. That is one of the criteria, one of the Supreme Court cases that help officers, that kind of created a standard, a test as to how officers respond in situations like this. And one of the outer aspects of that is, and I mentioned earlier about the officer doesn't have the benefit of hindsight. And they're often in situations that are rapidly evolving, constantly changing, quick decision making. That officer responded the way he did. I would guess, based on based on the fact that the officer wasn't found guilty, was that his attorneys emphasized the fact that he had to make a split-second decision in a situation where he believed that he might be coming in contact with a suspect who had previously committed an armed robbery. They emphasized the Graham versus Connor cases. They emphasized the Tennessee versus Garner Supreme Court cases, and said he didn't have the benefit of sitting back and saying, "Man, that wasn't a gun. That was a guy's phone," or that was a buckle on the end of the seatbelt that he saw a glimmer, and then and I'm just saying this hypothetically, that he might have fired. Those are the factors that play a role in all this. And like I said, from the outside looking in, it may look like, man, officers just keep getting off. But I can show you videos. If you visit my YouTube channel, there are videos where a suspect gets pulled over by the police and he is completely compliant and respectful to the officers. And in a split second, he shoots one officer. He pulls out a gun, shoots one officer, and tries to shoot the other officer. I can show you multiple videos like that. And I'm not even talking about a guy who gave the impression that he was angry or being disrespectful. You have people who are being completely cooperative and nice and respectful, who just go instantly trying to kill the officer. That's how quick and rapid these situations can change. And the courts, thankfully, the courts recognize that is an aspect of policing that cannot be ignored. And it plays a major factor in the decision-making process for the jury when the officer is standing before them.
Okay, so just to put a bookmark there, and we'll carry on to the other cases. But you
Mm-hmm.
talked about earlier when we weren't recording, that there's a difference between how a citizen is seeing something and how an officer is seeing something.
Right.
Right. So, and even as I'm thinking, just as a citizen, I'm thinking, oh, well, let you know that he had
Right.
a licensing, like you said, he's trying to comply.
Right.
But from your standpoint, it seems as though, because of you guys' experience in the field, you guys have experience of people looking very, like you said, innocent and like they wouldn't
Cooperative.
cooperative and so forth. So that's really tough. I just think
And it plays a role. And when you're going through your police academy, when you're going through your training, you're watching these videos. Let me paint a scenario. It's 2:00 in the morning. Where are you? What state are you in again?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. It's 2:00 in the morning. You're patrolling the streets in your police vehicle. You pull over a vehicle. You have no idea who's in the vehicle. You have no idea if there's someone in the trunk. You have no idea if the guy or girl that you pulled over is an ex-felon who's got loads of dope in his car, and he's thinking to himself, I'm not going back to prison.
Mm-hmm.
He's committed to that. When you walk up to that vehicle, you have no idea what he's thinking. So you're going to approach that vehicle guarded. Now you're not going to approach it with your gun out and just ready to pull the trigger immediately, but you're going to go up there knowing that the potential for this situation to escalate and become a deadly force encounter is there, is lurking. And it's not being paranoid, it's being realistic, because the potential is lying there in every person contact that a police officer makes every day. The potential is there. I know personally, I recall a time where we were looking for a guy who had shot someone. One of my buddies was looking for him. He was in his patrol vehicle. He saw a guy that kind of matched the description. He brought the guy over. My buddy's Arabic. He's like from Yemen, police officer. And he stops the guy. He has the guy come over to his car, pats him down. The dude's got like this revolver, like a .357 in his back pocket. The dude tells him, man, if you weren't like, because he looked like he might have been like Hispanic or something along those lines. He said, man, if you weren't brown, I would have killed you. That's what the dude told that officer. He told my boy that. I didn't hear a rumor of this. He told him that because he told me later. He's a Muldrow. He said, dude said, if I wasn't brown, he would have shot me because he was committed not to going back to prison. That, I'm not saying that's not even the typical person you come in contact with. That's not the norm. We know that. The vast majority of people that we come in contact with are good, average, everyday, or even they may be criminals, but they're not trying to commit acts of violence on people. But there's always that chance. There's always that chance. So that factor, that plays a role in what the officer does. And let me make one more point. When you approach a vehicle, there are danger zones in those vehicles. If the individual's hands, they have their hands down, you want their hands controlled. Put your hands on the wheel. Like I would say, could you put your hands on the wheel where I can see them, please? That's what I'd ask them to do. And the person doesn't, and like they say, why? And they got their hands down. I'm going like, you need to put your hands where I can see them. And I may pull my gun out and say, you need to put your hands where I can see them. Because I don't know what's in your hands. You can bust out a Uzi for all I know and just start spraying me. And it's happened. You know, we can show video where situations like that happen. So there's danger zones, and the average citizen isn't thinking about that. Oh, well, somebody could pop out of the trunk and shoot the officer. It's happened before. Somebody could be in the back seat. The windows could be tinted out. The officer says, could you roll down your windows, please? And the guy's like, why? Because I can't see in. I need to at least be able to see in. I'm not trying to hem you up, but I'm concerned for my own safety. If I can't see what's going on in the back seat, somebody could have a gun pointed right on me. You have limo tint or something along those lines. Those are aspects that the citizen doesn't think about. That's why training has to take place. My academy was 6 months long, and then I had an additional 20 weeks of field training, which was kind of like an OJT. So basically a year of my life was spent in training to be a police officer, to patrol the streets here in Las Vegas. And then you go to 40 hours of annual training and multiple hours of additional training that goes on, that takes place amongst the squads. And so you can't, so when I hear a lot of people who keyboard warriors, and I know not everybody's a keyboard warrior. A lot of people have good intent. I understand that, and they have legitimate questions. But when you hear a lot of people assuming to know what it takes to be a police officer, what the cops should have done, it can be really frustrating. And often, so many times, they just don't even want to hear an opposing opinion.
All right, so last three: Laquan McDonald, Tamir Rice, and Sandra Bland. Remember Laquan McDonald in Chicago?
Oh yeah, there's really not a whole lot to discuss on that, because there were already cops on the scene. Mm-hmm. There were that officer got just what he had come. No, in my mind, no question whatsoever.
So they were wrong in that case.
Absolutely, mm-hmm. Absolutely, because like I said, there were officers there, and there's something known as what's the term I'm looking for? Like imminent danger, or if you have a group of officers there and and this guy wasn't coming at them in any threatening motion, and then this officer comes up there and just guns the guy down, it's just like he had opened himself up to any lawsuit, and he got what he had coming. I have no sympathy in my heart for him. And let me bring up one other case.
Well, even to point that out a little bit more, there was like even a cover up with that.
Now, see, I didn't know that. I didn't know that
there was a cover up, and to me, he still didn't get all what he deserved. Like he only got maybe about 3 years or something like that for that.
Yeah, let me talk about something else, because the Sandra Bland case is another case that I never really went into a whole lot of detail studying. But when we talk about situations, like I said, let's be real, or allow me to be real when it comes down to people talking about a code of silence, the thin blue line in law enforcement. That's real. That's real. Just like in the hood with your homies and whatnot, you don't want to be a snitch. It's real. And it takes a bold officer. And like I said, I ain't got nothing. I would speak out on this when I was patrolling. I was bold about mine. If an officer was doing dirt, I said, man, if I knew an officer had a bad reputation, he showed up on my call, I'd be like, bro, don't bring that nonsense over here, because that wasn't the way I got down. I had respect in my community because people appreciated the fact that I did my job as righteously as possible. Now, sometimes it's just an ugly job by the nature of what you have to do. But I did my job, and I treated people to the best of my ability the way I wanted to be treated. Mm-hmm. I wasn't just going off, talking crazy to them. I would do it sometimes to have fun, just to kind of lighten up a moment. But and I'm not tooting my own horn, but I had multiple situations where I had people say, man, Muldrow, why can't other officers be like you? Well, first of all, I was older. By the time I went out to patrol the streets, I was 36, getting ready to turn 37. I had spent 10 years in the jail working. So I was older. I felt like I didn't have anything to prove to anybody. Like, I'm not trying to impress my sergeant or whatever the case may be by bringing in the most arrests and body slamming anybody. And then on top of it, that was never my personality. That's just not who I am. By the grace of God, that's not who I am. And but I would have people compliment me on just my demeanor. Now, I could get ignorant if I had to. I could get ignorant. Like, you want to get ignorant with me, and I'm trying to de-escalate the situation. You want to get ignorant? Okay, all right, let's go. Let's get ignorant together. We'll have a good time, and we'll see who's going to win out. But at the same time, the reality is there is a code, and it's not so much as it's not written or anything like that. But oftentimes if you call out another officer for doing wrong in a lot of areas, a lot of communities in policing, you're going to be frowned upon. You're going to be, you're going to be like ostracized. That's usually how it works. You're going to be ostracized. I know that for a fact personally because I've been there. When you call out a situation when an officer does wrong or a supervisor does wrong, and then you have people looking at you like you're making it up, you're a liar and all this kind of stuff, and you know for a fact that you're telling the truth, it's tough. And a lot of people don't have the fortitude to deal with that. So unfortunately, you have cops that kind of go with the flow, and they get caught up in the mix just along with those other idiots.
Well, you got ahead, which is good because that was going to be my wrap.
I'm sorry.
Wrap up question to all of these, your insight on all of these cases, because I was going to ask you, like, what about the accountability piece, like officers holding other officers accountable, because that's another part of the narrative. Like, why can't officers, hold their own accountable? And you're saying that it's really difficult to do that.
They can and they should. And I think it's something that you're even trained to do when you're in the police academy. But we also know that any of us who've ever been on a job, a lot of times there's what you do by the book, and then what you do when you really hit the ground running, you start doing the job. And they would tell us about integrity and all this kind of stuff. And Las Vegas Metropolitan Police has an acronym. And it goes by I CARE: integrity, courage, accountability, respect for others, and excellence. And often, and like I said, when I was going through the police academy after having been to the corrections officer academy, and I would hear them pushing the whole integrity thing and accountability, there was like a little jadedness that had developed in me because I knew how the department worked. I was like, man, they sitting up there pushing all this stuff right over here. Man, you get out there on those streets and you see an officer do wrong, in a lot of situations, and you say something, a lot of situations you're going to be ostracized. Now, they did the best they could, though, to Las Vegas Metro Police's credit. They've developed, to the best of their ability, a culture of encouraging you to say something, because the good thing about it is, even though this mass media age we're living in with cameras everywhere, that's also a good thing. Mm-hmm. Because that holds people accountable. Because human nature, as a Christian man, human nature is sinful. Mm-hmm. Human nature is sinful. So I'm going to cover, the natural response is, well, I don't want to get in trouble. What do kids do? I'm a lie, so I don't get in trouble. That's like a natural response. And it's rare where you have a person who's able to be man or woman enough to say, you know what, I screwed up. I need to take accountability for my actions. And I honestly would tell guys this, some of my guys that I work with, I said, fellas, if I ever get to the point where I do something stupid, like let's just say some dude spits in my face and I'll lose it and I beat him up or something, I go too far, I would tell them straight up, don't lie for me. Mm-hmm. Don't lie for me, because I'm not, if you lose your job because you lied trying to cover up for me, I ain't the one that's got to pay your bills and put food in your put money in your pocket to pay, give food to your kids. I ain't the one that's going to do that. And I said, and on the flip side of that, if I see you doing something stupid, I'm not lying for you. So don't do it. Don't do it around me is what I would tell them. Don't do it around me. Right. And but like I said, here in Vegas, they created a culture of being honest, because if it's found out that you lied during an investigation, that's automatic. You could lose your job based on that, period. And I thought that was a good thing. A lot of people say, oh, that's too harsh and all this kind of stuff. But I'm like, no, the public holds us to a higher standard, and they should. We are operating on behalf of the state or the city or the county, and we are public servants. That's our job. So they should hold us to that standard. If you have a problem with that, get your act together so you ain't got to worry about it. Right. But the sad and unfortunate case is there are too many opportunities. There are too many times where officers continue to challenge or destroy the trust between law enforcement and the citizen by their careless actions.
That's interesting, because in that Laquan McDonald case, there were other officers that wrote reports that were lies. Mm-hmm. So again, that's in support of what you're saying about.
Oh, I'm not shocked. That doesn't shock me at all. It's tragic. It's unfortunate. but that doesn't shock me at all. And anyone else who's an officer or has any background in it, who's honest, they'll tell you the same thing. They'll tell you, if they're telling you the truth, they'll say the same thing.
Mm-hmm. What about Tamir Rice, the little boy that was killed? What, if that were you, what would you have done, you think? Or what do you know about that?
Yeah, that case like really, really bothered me. Every time I would watch that, every time I saw that situation, that case really bothered me. That's another example to me of bad decision-making all the way around. I don't know of a time where I would ever just drive up on someone, whether I thought they were holding a gun or not, and just unload. I just don't know of a time where anyone would even train or tell someone that's a good idea. And like I said, granted, I understand you have hindsight, it's 2020 and all this kind of stuff, and the situations are rapidly evolving, but okay, let's take a step back. How that kid was just wandering around in one little area. How hard would it have been to pull up from a safe distance, get on? And this is me thinking. This is just me thinking as an officer. How hard would it have been, considering that it was it looked relatively controlled. It wasn't like he was running down the street with a gun in his hand or pointing it at people. There wasn't none of that going on. If I'm not mistaken, he was like at a park bench or something along those lines, wasn't he? If I recall correctly. It's been a while since I saw the video. How hard would it have been for them to pull up 50 meters away and got on their loudspeaker, which most patrol cars have, and just give him commands? One officer could have been holding the gun, like aiming at him, and the other officer could have been, you with the gun in the gray jacket, drop the gun, get on the ground now, or we will shoot. To me, that I don't understand. We're not in the 70s and 60s anymore where people have the horrific tactics and kicking in door, just the stupid tactics. We've learned in a good way because of, unfortunately, from all the combat we've seen as a country. A lot of veterans get out and they join police agencies, and you learn different tactics, like what works. So police tactics, when it comes to dealing with armed suspects in static situations. I'm not talking about, crazy volatile situations. In more static, more slower paced situations, even though a gun was involved, our tactics have changed tremendously. I've been in similar situations like that. And I'm only going by what I think could have been an option. I think you would have been able to rectify that situation and no lives would have been lost. And that's just really heartbreaking. That situation is really heartbreaking to me.
Okay. All right. And last one, Sandra Bland.
Yeah, and I had said it earlier. I really didn't get into I didn't really look into the Sandra Bland case too much. Okay. So if I speak on that, it'll just be hearsay, and I really don't want to do that.
Okay. All right. So let's transition to the next topic now, and kind of in the same wheelhouse. And you were a correctional officer as well, you said.
Yes, ma'am.
So talk to me about prison reform and your thoughts about what you see happening with the First Step Act, what some celebrities are seeking to do with reform, and so forth. And then after you answer that, I have some questions about how we could utilize truly reformed and repentant ex-felons in society and possibly in law enforcement. But go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a little torn when it comes to the First Step Act, because I realize that back in the 80s, during the crack era, when the crack era was really hot and heavy, especially when you're talking about drug crimes, drug offenses, I've had family members, and I've seen the neighborhoods, and I've seen the areas that were decimated and destroyed because of drugs. And oftentimes you hear nonviolent drug offenders. I'm sure they're out there, but I haven't ran into too many who don't. Usually there's a weapon or a gun in the vicinity when a lot of these crimes are taking place. So now, is it possible? So my first point is that the Black community, we were the ones who were crying out for the politicians to do something. When the crack epidemic was destroying lives, it wasn't like we sat back and the white folks came in and say, okay, we're going to get all these dads out of the house and run all these people up. No. And we were the ones who were saying, you need to do something. And if you don't, it's going to be evidence to us that you are a bigot, that you're a racist, because you're not showing any love or not showing any concern for the Black community. So we were the ones who wanted harsher sentences, harsher penalties. But nowadays, that whole narrative has been kind of finagled to look at it as, well, these harsher penalties were racist from the get-go, and because it ultimately affected the black community, in particularly Black males. So you need to change these penalties and reduce them. So I think history has a funny way of being distorted oftentimes, and oftentimes Black folks, and we're the victim of that distortion. So now, can we look back at it now and say some of these penalties might be a little too harsh based on maybe some new information? Absolutely. Or and maybe give another person, like a person gets a life sentence for, having a certain amount of drugs, that could be doing too much. So I love the fact that we're reevaluating these situations, but I also want us to be, I think we're in an age now where drugs, it doesn't, we're viewing it as it's not that, a drug offense is not that big a deal. But I think in that picture, we're also, and I think that's partly because of the more liberal culture that we're living in, but I also am too intimately familiar with the impact of drugs on families and on lives, like how destructive they really are. So I'm a little torn when it comes down to I definitely believe in prison reform. I definitely believe that these men and women should have opportunities when they get out. They should have more opportunities, and they should be able to get some of their rights back because they served the penalty. They paid the penalty for their crimes. But I also think we should be a little careful, because I actually had emailed the White House and was wanting to see if I can actually get an invite to go up there and actually discuss this, because all I was hearing was Kanye West and what's her name, his wife?
Kim Kardashian.
Them speaking of it. And I'm like, well, and I'm not saying that they didn't talk to anybody with a law enforcement background. I'm sure they did. But we have to look at this as completely as possible. I hate, it seems to be like there's this culture of lacking accountability that seems to be just growing more and more. And I really hate that, because much of the problem, and as I mentioned earlier, that plague us as a community when it comes to the Black community, is a lack of accountability. We do a good job in many situations of playing the blame game. Someone else doing this to us is what got us here. Yeah, that could be the case in some situations, but it's not always the case. So that's kind of like just my short little take when it comes to some of the mindset of or the concept of prison reform and First Step Act.
So as far as like a solution for when ex-felons come out, I actually had the opportunity to go a few weeks ago to a event called Ban the Box. Not sure if you've ever heard of it.
No, I haven't.
Basically, Ban the Box is a grassroots effort led by many ex-felons who have, proven reformed, and they are saying, hey, we're coming out of prison, we've done our time, we are, truly remorseful, we want to get back into society and press reset. However, when we try to go get a job, we have this little box that says, check it if you have committed a convicted felon, right? And so basically what that ends up doing is being discriminatory towards them, in the sense that typically people just going to put it to the side. They're not going to be like, oh, enthused about hiring an ex-felon. So they're basically saying, listen, you're going to do a background check on us anyway. How about let's just remove that to give us a fair shot that we can at least get an interview, and then we can maybe explain our situation and, show that we have, we're reformed or whatever. Bring the, references in society, in our community who can vouch for us, or whatever it takes to be able to press reset and get back into society. Because
right.
what happens is, why the recidivism rate and why, felons end up going back to jail is because they get out. It's kind of like, I should have stayed in there because I can't get a job. I can't get an apartment. I can't get an occupational license if I want to try to, start a business. It's just really tough. Now, some obviously do end up doing that, but they end up having a lot of support, going through programs and so forth. But just wondering what your take is on that, and would you be in support of something like that?
Now, this is the first time I've heard of ban the box, and I'm kind of intrigued by it. I wrote it down so I can definitely look into it some more. But just off the top of my head and just from my background, I've been an advocate of prison reform. I've spoken of that or on that, for a long time, just like amongst friends and peers and whatnot. But at the same time, whereas I understand they should have an opportunity to get a fresh start, absolutely. But at the same time, you have people out there who are, well, the employee. Does the employee have a right to know who they're getting, who they're hiring? But if I'm a banker and I hire someone and he has a history of money laundering or just petty theft or whatever the case may be, do I have the right to know that? Those are questions that need to be addressed, and I think it's a tough one. It's a really difficult question. Like I say, I think some of the things that was brought up, you said that was brought up at the event that you were at, where they were talking about bringing references and showing that they're remorseful and demonstrating, some semblance of a history of, even while they're locked up, of, reform. Demonstrating a history of reform. I think something like that needs to be displayed because, you want me to wait?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think some of that needs to be displayed because I know many people who get locked up and they get out and they're no different whatsoever. They get a little side job and they're still out there committing crimes. So it's a hard one. I think it needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis, maybe something along those lines. But just like a blanket, we don't ask these questions about your prior convictions. I don't know about that. I can't say that I agree with that 100%. I think that's a tough one, and it should be evaluated by the individual. And then I'm also of this mindset too. Man, in this day and age, you can do whatever you want to do. And I've known people that I've known ex-felons who started their own businesses. I've known people that have homicides on their record that became successful. And they had struggles, they had challenges. I'm not saying it's easy, but I remember some of the conversations I would have with guys. There's some guys that I knew my whole law enforcement career. I started seeing them as a rookie officer when I was working in the jail here out in Vegas, and I saw them before I retired. They're still out there getting high, doing their thing, going to jail every 2 weeks. And I would have conversations with them. I was like, man, what do you want to do with your life? Like, seriously. I said, man, like, we're around the same age. I'd be looking at some of these guys. I said, we're around the same age. And, I got to the point where I knew them. We had many conversations. We felt pretty comfortable talking to each other. I could just, stop them and we just chop it up. And they're like, man, I'm having trouble. I can't do this. I can't do that. I said, man, I'm not buying it. Honestly. I said, do you really want to change? Do you really want to be successful? Do you really want to do something else? Because if you really wanted to, you could. And I'm really, truly of that mindset. And all we have to do is rewind history and look at people like Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, Ida B. Wells. We can go through history of people that were post-slavery or slaves themselves who became successful in a world, in a society that hated them. But they managed to rise up above their situation and still be successful. And so I'm just of the mind, I've seen too many people. Now, granted, I'm not saying it's easy.
Right.
I'm not saying it's easy by any stretch of the imagination, and not every situation is completely the same. But I'm truly of the mindset that, yeah, we can make adjustments. We can change some things up to allow that individual to have more opportunities. But where there's a will, there's a way. I'm a true believer of that. True believer of that.
True. I definitely see where you're coming from, because those are some questions that need to be considered when you know, considering someone who has been an ex-felon and so forth.
Absolutely.
But I'm always assuming though, right? I'm when I'm making this case for ban the box or in support of prison reform, I'm always assuming the best case scenario. So I've already weeded out those people who clearly are committed to a life of crime. You know what I mean?
Now, but how would you go about doing that?
Or I don't know. That's the whole thing. So it's just kind of a brainstorm that's out there, and I don't think that anyone who's an advocate of it right now, has it all neat yet.
Right.
But the people that are advocating it are ex-felons one that I know personally, who was convicted of something pretty heinous, and he's now a pastor, and is
Amen.
it's just like I wouldn't even know. And I actually did a video.
Right.
I'll let you see. It's called R. Kelly Prison Reform and Ban the Box. So you can look at that video and my thoughts on that. But
that's a heck of a title right there. I'm definitely gonna look at that.
So my assumption is like, these are the top tier people that we can somehow verify. That was my thing.
I understand.
My solution would be let's put them through some sort of rigor to verify their character, that they're truly before we do that. But that was a good point that you made in terms of, hey, if you're a banker or something like that, but I don't know that they would be applying for those sorts of jobs. But which brings me to another point, because I'm very solution oriented and have been thinking about this for some years now, particularly during the police brutality conversation that was going on during the Obama administration. I wrote a piece about it on my page on Medium. But in terms of solutions, right? So what do we do? What can we do with these ex-felons? Because, and again, assuming the best, right? That we verified them and that they are ready to get back and they're good people now, and sorrowful. How can we utilize their talents, right? And for instance, I'm thinking about the border, right? Everybody's got their opinions in a bunch about the border right now.
Right.
Wouldn't it be awesome to, if for any of ex-felon that wanted to have a career in law enforcement post prison, that they could be some sort of
security
or para-police. Yeah, security is a para-police, but yeah, some sort of security force that could be utilized at the border, or utilized as TSA. How can we get the federal and government involved in maybe employing these people, or cities or governments? Cities or local governments. Another thing that I thought too, in terms of everyone was talking about policing the community and stuff like that. What if there was a para-police type of force of these individuals, and even veterans, you know what I'm saying, that are coming out, that could be utilized to help support police officers. And I wrote about it extensively, and I'll send you that link, and I'd be interested.
Please do. Because I already got a ton of questions running through my head when you talk about some of these ideas. I'm like, I don't know about that. So
I don't know. I'm not in law enforcement. Right. Citizens that don't have a law enforcement mind. So,
because one of the first things that popped up in my head is, we already have an issue. People already have a belief that, with the immoral integrity of a lot of law enforcement officers. Right. So then you're going to add some felons on top of it. It's just like, man, oh man. And then and I'm not saying all felons are built the same. I know that. You have guys who might be a felon because of a white collar crime, so to speak. And then you have someone else over here who might be in there for sexual assault. There's so many.
Yeah, again, like I said, there would be a lot of unpacking.
Right, a lot of
unpacking, and like I said, I guess my idea is just too generic, but I'm assuming that we're doing some analysis here. You know what I'm saying? You just can't be an ex-felon, and
You can't be a murderer and be a patrolling the streets and stuff
right.
like that.
Check out that video though, and I'm going to send you
I will.
that link, and then maybe that'll help some. All right, so now just to kind of wrap it up, go ahead and tell everyone about your journey to conservatism. Have you always been a conservative, right?
Oh, no, not at all. My journey to conservatism, and I did a walk-away video on this to be exact, and it's got pretty good traction. It's got quite a few views on it. But my journey overall was the fact that I was living as a hypocrite. I was professing to be born again, and my life was totally contrary to that. Totally contrary to that. And I'm gonna give you the condensed version because I get emotional when I start giving you my testimony, which is what brought me to where I'm at now, my political views. So I'm giving you the compressed version of it. But then as time went on, I just started being convicted of the way I was living my life. I understood that I was a sinner and I would ultimately have to stand before God and give an account for the life that I lived. And I was truly fearful of that. I was truly fearful of that. And it was through watching a television program called Way of the Master, where they teach Christians how to evangelize. It was funny because even though my life was contrary to that, I loved to learn about apologetics and defending the faith. Mm-hmm. But I was like not being obedient like whatsoever. And but when I was truly convicted and brought to my knees before the cross, understood that I was a sinner before a holy and righteous God, and if I died in my sin, that I would be condemned. I would be eternally condemned. So I repented. I cried out to God to save me. And over the years of that journey of where he truly brought me out of my sin and brought me in a direct relationship with him, I started listening to really sound and solid biblical teachers who challenged me on, well, it wasn't like me individual, but just listening to podcasts and sermons and different shows. I was really challenged by my convictions because I was a, black man and, we're Democrats. I mean, that's just how it is. We're Democrats. But then when I started being challenged on the issues of abortion, when I really started looking at what scripture says, how God hates the hands that shed innocent blood and how mankind is created in his image, I just started having to look at things differently. When I just started looking at the change of a culture where a biblical view on marriage is being, you're hated for holding to a traditional biblical view on marriage. And I just started seeing the radical shift that was taking place, even more so. And then the Democrats started making, like the truth of the Democratic Party, it started becoming more and more clear to me. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying over here, I'm walking, professing to be a born-again believer. How can I support a political party that believes these things as in part of their platform, things that God calls sin? Mm-hmm. How can I align myself with that party, with these beliefs, with their beliefs on marriage, with their beliefs on gender, with their beliefs on abortion? How can I align a man who professes to be a follower of Christ? How can I align myself with them? And it got to the point, and then I started looking at the more conservative issues, and I don't profess to be a Republican. I'd say I'm definitely conservative. But when you look at the platforms and you look at them side by side in the issues that they argue and they go about and they stand on, they're like night and day. Mm-hmm. And then I started doing some history. By God's grace, some of my Facebook, new people I met on Facebook started introducing me to I started learning about the history of the parties. And I learned about the Democratic Party and their history. And I was like, I never knew. We're going back some years, but it was like I never knew these things. The history of how the Republican Party was basically formed to abolish slavery, and how, and all the anti-civil rights drives and push that came from the Democratic Party. I was just like, I cannot, historically and currently, I cannot align myself with this political party, period. And I had to walk. And I literally had to walk away before walk away became cool.
So tell me, so how do you answer critics and maybe even your family members who say, how can you align yourself with Republicans? They're the same.
I say they're clearly not the same. I just tell them that. I tell them basically what I just told you. I said, there's no way I can align myself with that. I tell that to anybody who's willing to listen. I said, there's no way. I said, my convictions are not simply based on a political party. My convictions are based on the clear words of God, the clear teachings of Scripture. Those are my convictions. And I look at which party's platform aligns more with that.
Correct. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm saying, and I ultimately have to lay my head down at night knowing that I did the best to the best of my ability. I honored my Lord. I honored my Lord and Savior to the best of my ability. And I've shared that conversation with many a Christian, and none of them have a response. None of them can really articulate, well, this is why I hear what you're saying, but they may try, but they can't. There's really no argument. If you profess to be a follower of Christ, there's really no sound, consistent argument to say that you support the Democratic Party. There just isn't any. With all the things that they support on their platform, is a no-brainer to not be affiliated. I'm not saying you have to be a Republican. I'm not saying that. But it should be a no-brainer to say that I cannot align with this party.
Correct. Unfortunately, there is a movement within Christianity among the social justice.
Oh, I know.
Warriors type who love to accuse Christian conservatives as making being Republican or voting Republican this politicizing Christianity.
Right.
But that's not it at all. We're just basically saying this party more aligned with what
I believe to be the teachings of Scripture. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it will enable us to be able to worship freely and the myriad of other things, right?
That's another point. Right. That's another point. I wrote on my Facebook page. I got up early this morning and I jotted down. And I'm not trying to keep you. I apologize. And I jotted down. I watched a interview from Cory Booker. I guess that he made. I don't know if it was last night. He had a town hall meeting, and he's basically saying how he's a Christian. And I'm saying this is the same Cory Booker that questioned I can't remember who the man was, but he questioned this man for his biblical convictions on marriage, and basically was saying that he was disqualified from political office because of those views. But yet you profess to be a follower of Jesus Christ. The party that is looking to ban or limit the way that you practice your freedom to practice your beliefs as a Christian is the Democratic Party. And you're going to go and vote and get these people in office? You're going to get these people in office? I'm like, are you insane? Like, do you not realize what is going on around you? I'm dying to have a conversation with my brother because he's looking like he's a Cory Booker fan. I'm sitting up there like, dude, you got to be kidding me. And you're a Christian too? Nah, man. Tell me how that lines up. Tell me how that works. Because, like I said, you're like you're cutting off your own leg, by supporting people who have clearly articulated that your biblical beliefs are not wanted. Period. And they need to be.
Hold one moment. Okay. So to just wrap things up, Mr. Muldrow.
Yes, ma'am.
We would just basically say that you are definitely an advocate of prison reform, as well as your views on police brutality have been very insightful and enlightening to the audience, I'm sure.
I hope so.
And you had to walk away from the Democratic Party.
Yes, I ran.
You had to run away from the Democratic Party. Is there anything else that you want to say about, code red conversations? Like, why call it code red? Explain that.
Well, code red, that's like emergency, and it has a natural correlation to the police. And it just flowed well. I was just brainstorming, trying to think of a name, and I was like, Code Red. I said, yeah, no, that's going to work. I said, because you can see that, and you can kind of get an idea of what's being discussed. You know, it has something to do with emergency of some form. And I honestly believe that with the culture shift that's taken place in recent years, and with police brutality and those issues being at the forefront, that we are at a state of emergency. When the people that you call on are looked upon as being the enemy, there's a problem there. Whether it's factual or whether it isn't. And if it isn't, then we need to be able to dissect and examine these different situations so that the culture can have a better understanding of the police practices and not live in fear. I literally want to help not just Black folks, but anyone who questions the good intentions of law enforcement officers, who questions those good officers. I literally want them to be free to understand that not everything is as cut and dry as you may believe it to be, and that there's a lot more gray in this black and white world that we're living in, especially in the area of law enforcement.
Awesome, awesome. So tell everyone how they can reach out to you, your website, your social media handles, things of that nature.
Yeah, you can find Code Red Conversations right now. I'm on YouTube. Definitely come over there and like and subscribe and hit the bell, so when I put out a video, you're getting the next one, that you're right there. And you can find me under the same name, or find Code Red Conversations under the same name on Facebook. And yeah, so those are the best ways to get a hold of me.
Awesome. So you and I have a lot to probably talk about, because we can, we got a lot of different issues that we're on the same page about. So
yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Have another interview and go into some other topics.
Oh, yeah, just let me know.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.